Hello and welcome to the A-Level Economics presentation. Hopefully it should answer many of the questions you might have and help you make the right choice for your A-Levels. So one of the first questions most people have is who will actually teach me. So you can see that for half your timetable you'll be taught by myself, Mr. Edwards, I'm head of department, and also then for the other half you'll be taught by Mrs. Hornblow. We're both very experienced teachers. We've taught together for 17 years, and between us we've got over 45 years of experience of teaching, and we're also both very experienced examiners for the WJC exam board. So the next question most people have is, what actually is economics? So you can see it's the study of the ways in which people, businesses and industries use the world's resources and the different factors therefore that affect our wealth and our well-being. As you study economics, you learn all about how it affects the world and the ways we live our lives, but also how then we can improve the economy to give benefit to everybody in society. Economics as a subject can be broadly split into two areas: microeconomics, which will be taught to you by Mrs. Hornblow, and macroeconomics, which will be taught by me. So over the next few slides, we'll take it in turns to briefly describe some of the topic areas that you'll study and some of the issues that you might consider.
We start by looking at what a market is, and we assume that it is a free market with a large number of buyers and sellers, all with perfect information. We study both the demand for products and the supply of products, and we look at all the factors that might influence demand and supply. We use diagrams and are able to determine what we call an equilibrium price for that product in the free market. Once we've gained an understanding about this supply and demand, we can then look at how responsive the demand for that product is to a change in other factors. For example, if there's a change in price or a change in income or a change in the price of other products, how does that affect the demand for the product we're looking at? Once you've gained an understanding of how things would work in a free market, we then look at how in reality this doesn't actually often happen. So we have to have an understanding of market failure. And there are many ways in which markets fail. For example, we might have a monopoly power, there could be income inequality, volatile prices, quite a number of ways that markets fail, which you would learn about. After we've learned about the market failure, we can move on to look at how governments intervene in markets and the effects that this intervention has in trying to prevent that market failure. Everything we learn about in the course is really happening in the world. So over the next few slides, just some examples of news articles that relate to that part of the course. So a little bit of food for thought about the sorts of things you might be learning about.
For the macroeconomic side of the course, we start by looking at a simple economy and we build it up so that it resembles the much more complex world economy that we live in. We consider the government objectives, especially the government objective of the UK economy initially. So its targets for inflation levels, for unemployment levels, for economic growth and for the balance of payments. We then move on to looking at the government policies and tools that they've got at their disposal to achieve their targets for those objectives. So we'd look at fiscal policy, so we'd look at government taxation levels, government spending levels, and the impact that would have on economic activity. We'd look at what we call monetary policy, which is interest rates and other tools that the government's got at their disposal, again, to try to achieve their government objectives, the targets. We also then consider the impact of exchange rates and also the role of international trade in improving living standards in our economy. In order to improve living standards, one of the key government objectives is the achievement of steady and sustained economic growth. So we look at the ways the government can try to achieve this, but we'd also look at the impact that this would have in the past on the UK, but we also look at countries with high growth rates such as China, and also the impact of negative or low growth rates such as Japan and their lost decade. One of the key ways we can increase our living standards and output levels is to improve our productivity levels. So we look at how that can be achieved, and we compare different productivity levels of different countries around the world and look at their rates of development. One of the key ways we can achieve these improvements in living standards and output levels is to increase productivity levels. So we look at the ways in which that can be achieved, and then we look at different countries and their productivity levels, and therefore how it's affected their rate of development. When looking at activity levels in the UK economy, one of the main drivers in that is consumer spending. So we look at all the main influences on how much we spend, and we look at current influences and how that therefore impacts on the size of our economy. As well as looking at the levels of expenditure by consumers, we look at the levels of spending from firms and industry. And we look at the factors that affect those investment levels and also the importance of that investment spending on the whole economy. So quite a bit of consumer spending in our economy comes from debt. So we look at the impact of that on economic activity. And talking of debt, we also then look at the amount that governments are spending compared to the amount they're raising in taxation revenue. So we would look at the consequences of recent government policies in response to things like COVID-19 and the impact that they've had on our lives and the economy, but also the consequences that this is going to have for future generations. Talking of the consequences of economic policy making decisions, we look at the importance of the value of imports and exports to our economy. And we would try to look at some of the potential outcomes in the short term and the medium term and the consequences of the imminent exit of the UK from the EU. In May and June at the end of Lower 6, you will sit 2 exams, the first of which, Introduction to Economic Principles. The slightly shorter exam is made up of multiple choice questions and shorter questions, but covers the full AS course, micro and macro. And then the second exam is slightly longer, of 2 hours, and this one is a series of data response questions, again covering the full course content, micro and macro. So the results from this will make up 40% of the overall A-level result at the end of year 13. The A2 economics course in year 13 is again made up of 2 units, Unit 3, Exploring Economic Behaviour, and Unit 4, Evaluating Economic Models and Policies. And again, the teaching of it is split between Mrs. Hornblow and myself. So the next few slides, again, we'll just very briefly run through some of the topic areas you'll be looking at as part of your Year 13 studies.
We start by looking at costs, revenue, and profit. We do need some numerical skills here as we have to plot these figures onto graphs. We also learn about the different types of profits that firms can make, gaining an understanding that actually firms aren't only out to maximize profit, there are many objectives that firms will have. You will study about the ways in which firms grow, learning about the advantages and disadvantages that come with growth, looking at how they might be able to reduce their average costs, for example, by growing, but also there's going to be negative effects of the growth. A large part of this unit is looking at market structures, and we look at 4 different structures, starting with perfect competition. We then move on to monopolistic competition, oligopolies, and monopolies. Looking at these 4 structures, we look at how firms are efficient or inefficient, and we look at competition policy, reasons why governments might be concerned about levels of competition in the UK market or global markets, and we look at what can be done to try and increase competition in these markets. One method of increasing competition might be privatization, so we look at the differences between privatization and nationalization.
For macroeconomics at A2 level, we start by comparing what we call the Keynesian school of thought that you would have looked at in lower 6 with a contrasting school, which is the classical school for macroeconomic theory. and we'd look at the policy objectives again, but we would look more at the conflict between trying to achieve steady and sustained economic growth whilst at the same time achieving low unemployment and low inflation levels, and then the ideal of a balanced balance of payments. We'd also then look at the impact and importance of globalization, and we'd also take a look at what we call development economics, where we look at some of the obstacles to and the solutions for sustainable development for what we call less economically developed countries. Once we've studied the different contrasting macroeconomic theories, we apply these to recent policy decisions made in both our country and countries around the world. And we try to use those models to try to identify some of the consequences of those decisions. We also take a more global view of the world by looking at some of the more rapidly growing economies of the world and looking at the consequences this will have for the world economy. We also spend time looking at the consequences of globalization by evaluating the impact on different countries, so those countries that have benefited from globalization and those countries that have not. And at the end of year 13, you'll again face two exams. Unit 3 is a series of shorter questions and then a data response question, and Unit 4 is slightly longer in length and is a series of essay questions. Both papers cover all aspects of the A-level, so that's year 12 and year 13, that's micro and macro, and so we'll account for 60% of your overall A-level grade, so you'd add in then the 40% you got from the AS examination papers to find your overall grade. So there are many good reasons for choosing economics, but some of the more common ones that our students have told us is that firstly they really enjoy the challenge of the subject and being able to apply their knowledge to the wider world. Many students say it links very well to the wide variety of subjects, but most importantly they know that it's highly valued by university courses and by employers. And one of the main reasons why it's so highly valued by both universities and by employers is because you develop fantastic skills of analysis and evaluation. You'll be able to look at unfamiliar statistics and texts and situations and be able to draw valid conclusions and make informed decisions. So skills that are really valued later in life. A common misconception is that you've got to be fantastic at maths and studying maths A-level to be able to do well at economics, and that's just not true. So as long as you've got good numeracy skills from your GCSE, the course itself actually will develop your numeracy skills. And at the same time, of course, it also helps develop your communication skills. We do presentations, group debates, and also your extended writing will be greatly developed because, of course, you'll have an essay paper at the end of the course. And because most of the issues you consider are complex global problems, your skills of solving those problems will be highly developed, as will your awareness of a broader view of the world. So an economics qualification really does give you a good grounding to go into a wide range of careers, some of which you can see here. But the skills you develop as part of being an economist really are valued in practically every profession. And if you do decide to take your economics A-level further and go through an economics degree, you can see that the financial reward are only second really to doing a degree in medicine. So in this report from the BBC and the IFS in 2018 into the impact of courses chosen at university, you can see that the potential to be a high income earner is very clear if you do decide to choose economics as a degree. So if you do decide to do economics with us here at LHS, you'll have the reassurance of knowing that you are on a course that's always one of the top performing subjects for A-level results within school, but also compares very favourably nationally, not just within Wales, but across all UK schools of consistently being the top 25%. And Mrs. Hornblow and I were both very pleased with the most recent set of results, which confirmed the continuation of our classification as providing top class teaching and learning according to National ALPS grading criteria for both A level and at AS. We also asked some of our recent students what they would have wanted to know if they were starting their A levels all over again. So the slides that follow are some of their thoughts and some of the testimonials and their experiences of studying A-level economics with us. So hopefully you can get a flavour of the course that you'd have if you chose to stay at Llanishen. So I won't read through them all, I'll just let you read through them and I'll join you for the final couple of slides at the end of the presentation. Another common question we often get asked is what's the difference between economics and business A-level? So we tend to say that in business we study the different functional areas such as marketing, human resources, operations management, finance and accounts, so the internal functions of the business, and then how external factors impact on businesses' behaviour and decisions. Whereas in economics we tend to study the way that individuals, businesses and governments and even countries behave and the reasons why they behave in the way that they do. So economics then can be seen as a big picture concept of how business and trade works, whereas business A-level is more about what makes something profitable and feasible. Now many students can't decide between the two and often choose both, but if you're not clear about business, maybe try the business presentation after you finish this one. So I hope this presentation has helped answer many of the questions you might have about A-level economics and has also helped you make the right decision for yourselves in your A-level choice. If you have got any more questions, please obviously feel free to drop in to see either myself or Mrs. Hornblow and we'll do our best to answer those questions then. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.